Yeah, moin and welcome to our first webinar of the Intune Suite series. Today we have a look on Endpoint Privilege Management, how normal users can start applications with administrator right without being a local administrator. Yeah, today my colleague Stephen and I are here. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm called Stephen Beeler. I'm a cloud engineer at glueckkanja. I focus on development and automation in our managed Intune and managed Android services. I also have a focus on Mac OS management, and I'm based in Bern, Switzerland. So hello from Switzerland. I'm here also a lot in the tech community, and I'm a point of contact for our Swiss customers. So yeah, Felix, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I'm Felix Hollermann. I'm cloud engineer at glueckkanja, and my topics are managed Intune like Stephen, Azure Virtual Desktop, and Windows 365. Yeah, and everything which can be automated. And so on. So let's go on.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. So let's look at the agenda of today. So first we will do a brief introduction. Then we will look at what Endpoint Privilege Management actually is, its security benefits, the licensing, the prerequisites for EPM. Then we will take a look under the hood and look at the key concepts and components of Endpoint Privilege Management. Then we will look at the different policy types we get in Endpoint Privilege Management. And then we have two demos for you today. So we have a help desk approval process, and we will also look at an elevation rule with a certificate. In the end, we will look at the best practices for implementing and troubleshooting EPM. If you have any questions on the way, please be sure to write it into the Q&A section of this webinar. And then in the end, we will be able to answer your questions after we're through with the agenda. So yeah, let me get straight into it. Let us talk about the admin rights challenge. So I want to start this webinar with a famous quote by Sami Laiho, which is, "Admin rights are not human rights." And I think by now this is common knowledge. So it's old news that we shouldn't give our standard users administrator rights. But in practical terms, there are a lot of use cases where we tend to have to give our users administrator rights. Usually it's only occasional, and usually it's only for one application or for a script. And how this is handled these days, let's say you, for instance, have a developer which has to execute a lot of things with administrator rights. Then you give this developer a full-fledged local admin on his device, and you don't really know what this user is doing with this administrator. Or what is also a common scenario is using LAPS, so the local admin password solution of Microsoft. And this also comes with a lot of hassle. So you need to connect remotely onto the device of the user. You need to read out this huge password, type it in. Then after you're done with giving the user administrator rights, you need to do the password again. You need to renew the password of LAPS. So you can see there are a lot of challenges. And Endpoint Privilege Management solves all of these problems. So you really only give the user administrator rights for the application they're using, and also just in time, so you can revoke the rights again once the user is done and you're really sure that the user can't execute anything malicious that you don't want them to execute. So let's move on. I'll hand it over to Felix.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, in a perfect modern workplace world, clients would never need local administrator rights, especially when you have the right tools in place, tools like RhymeJoin as a companion tool to Intune, taking care of software deployment, updates, lifecycle management of application. And yeah, so the user has no user intervention for patching his system. And yeah, for most devices and typical organization, this setup works beautiful. But then God looked at the peaceful, well-structured world and said, "Hold my beer," and created the OT world, the operational technology. And suddenly everyone needed to install drivers, update firmware, and debug interfaces. And somehow the barcode scanner only works if you're an admin. Somehow the critical basic modding machine from 1990 can be only controlled using floppy disk, which of course must be written with a vendor flash tool that needs full admin rights to launch. Yeah, to put it in a nutshell or in a meme. Yeah, so what is Microsoft EPM? The definition, Intune Endpoint Privilege Management allows standard users to run specific applications or processes with administrator rights, on demand. It's a cloud-based solution built directly into Microsoft Intune. How it works in a higher level. The IT admins can define policies in Intune that identify which apps or tasks can be elevated. An EPM agent on the Windows device enforces these rules, allowing or denying elevation requests. And once the agent is installed, users get a run with elevated access in the Windows Explorer context menu, like here on the right side. And the key benefit of EPM, users can perform necessary admin required actions like installing software, updating drivers, running admin tools without being a full administrator on their devices. Some common use cases for EPM. First of all, the software installation. You can allow specific installers like Visual Studio Code or an VPN client to run elevated, so developers or power users can self-install without needing admin rights or the help desk support. Application updates or patches. You can enable elevation for known updaters that requires admin rights, ensuring users can update apps and securely and stay compliant. Device configuration changes allow scripts or tools like, for example, install printer drivers or update VPN settings to run elevated tasks that typically needs admin access. And you help remote users to fix issues without admin credentials. Another use case is running admin utilities. You can permit tools like registry editor or internal admin utilities for users and roles that need them without giving the full admin rights. Temporary admin on demand for help desk. Tier 1 support can use support approved mode to request one-time elevation for troubleshooting. All actions are logged directly into Intune. And you have an overview about the approvals and you have an traceability. And since the last quarter of 2025, starting an application with local admin rights as the currently logged on user. And some applications must be started as an administrator, but also require the access rights of the logged in user. By default, EPM uses a virtual account, but since the last quarter of the last year, you can also elevate your current user as an administrator for the specific app. But one hint here, use it with caution. And to say it in German, do not distribute it with a watering can. Normally, you should use the virtual account way, and this only for specific cases.
Yeah, thank you, Felix, for the use cases. As you can see, there are many different use cases, and we're just barely scratching the surface. Now I would like to quickly talk about the security benefits of EPM. So we already touched on this in the introduction. So with EPM, you can remove the daily full admin rights. So the user doesn't anymore have full rights on the machine, but only for the specific applications or scripts that you define. So like this, you can reduce the attack surface drastically. You can also mitigate insider risk. So it prevents users from executing potentially malicious software, since you only allow, for instance, signed software to be executed. It is also great for audit and compliance. So EPM logs everything. You can see exactly what was elevated at what time, when elevations were revoked again. And this is, of course, great to comply with the GDPR regulations, for instance, or also HIPAA and so on. And last but not least, it also aligns with Zero Trust. So you don't trust any applications except for the ones you define specifically, and you can also define just-in-time access, so the rights are only valid for the time of approval. And now let's move on to licensing. So there's a reason why we're actually doing this webinar today, and that is because Microsoft announced in 2025 that the Intune Suite will become part of the E5 license. So if you're using E5 licenses, you will get all the features of the Intune Suite. And if you're using E3, you get remote help and advanced analytics with your E3 license. We have webinars on all of these topics, so there should be a link in the chat. If you are interested, just go ahead and register for the other webinars. We are touching on all the topics. So let's get back to EPM. So EPM will be included in E5 by July 2026. And if you don't have the E5, as mentioned, if you, for instance, have an E3, you can still get it in the Intune Suite, or of course as standalone add-on, as you can get it today. And just be sure that you have the correct licenses enabled once you're using it, so you stay in compliance with the regulations of Microsoft licenses. The feature is already integrated into Intune. So if you go into your tenant in the Endpoint Security Blade, you should already have a blade for Endpoint Privilege Management. If you don't have a license yet, you can't create any policies. It's grayed out. But once you assign a license, you can start creating policies. So if you just want to test around, you can get one license and you can test on one device. The full feature set is enabled by using one license. Maybe a side note, if you're using education licenses, so A5, unfortunately, A5 won't include the Intune Suite features. Now let's talk about the prerequisites. So what do you need in your environment to make EPM work? And yeah, of course, it is supported on Windows 11, 64-bit and ARM architecture, which I find personally very nice that we see more support for this architecture. You also need a minimum OS build level, which is 21H2, so that's pretty old. Then the devices have to be Entra ID joined, or dare I say the scary word, hybrid ID joined. Of course, the devices need to be managed by Intune, so they get the policies. Co-management with SCCM is also possible. Just be sure that the devices get the Intune policies. If you have a very secure network, just be sure to avoid SSL inspection or blocking EPM URLs. Of course, they are required for the feature to work. And for the administration side, you can use the Intune administrator to create policies and deploy them. But there's also a built-in Intune role, which is the Endpoint Privilege Manager. This role can edit and create policies. And there's also a reader role, maybe more interesting for IT managers, so they can look at the policies and how they are defined, but the reader can't edit anything. And if this isn't enough, you can still go ahead and also create a custom role with EPM rights. One thing I also want to mention here, so this is really only a Windows-enabled feature. It doesn't work for Mac OS. It also works on AVD single session hosts, but not on multi-session hosts. And it also works on Windows 365. Yeah, so let me hand it over again to you, Felix.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Now we have a look on the EPM key concepts and components. Yeah, the main component of EPM is the EPM agent. It's automatically installed when you enable an EPM policy and scope it to a device. And yeah, when it's enabled, the users can select the run with elevated access. And yeah, the agent resists under C program files Microsoft EPM agent and enforce the policy locally. And yeah, when you're removing the policy, it will disable the agent and will be uninstalled automatically after 7 days. And yeah, so run with elevated access. You can use it for exe files, MSI files, and PowerShell scripts. And this context menu action triggers the EPM agent to check the Intune elevation rules for that file or executable. And yeah, it's lifetime. When you click on it, it will check immediately, and the Intune backend is there's a policy for this file, and yeah. Then there are two elevation types: managed and unmanaged elevations. Managed elevations are those handled by the EPM agent per the defined rules and the default behavior. And unmanaged elevations are when a user with actual local admin rights runs something with the normal run with administrator option. And so you have two types of elevations in the Intune reporting. Yeah, and the goal should be that everyday users have no direct admin rights, so all elevations on their session are managed by the EPM client. Yeah, and client data and reporting. The EPM agent can collect data on elevation events and send it to Intune for reporting. And this helps admins to see which apps are being elevated in the organization. Yeah, and the reporting settings are configurable. You can choose if you want only diagnostic data or include all elevation attempts in the tenant. And yeah, so you can choose what you want. Now we have a look on the policy types of EPM. Yeah, first there's the elevation settings policy. Yeah, this policy is the master switch for the client settings. Turning this on enables the EPM agent on target devices, and it also defines what happens if a user tries to elevate something that is not allowed by an elevation rule. So it's the default elevation response. And yeah, it sets data reporting preferences, whether to send elevation logs in Intune and how much detailed. And the elevation rules policy, one or more rules that specify particular programs and scripts which can run elevated and under what condition. And yes, so these are granular policies linking by a file. So you can choose the name, certificate, hash, and on other file properties to create an elevation rule. And so typically you have multiple elevation rules, and you can order it by department or software type. And yeah, let's have a look on an elevation policy with Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. Yeah, so let's talk about the elevation rules in specific. Felix already mentioned we have this elevation settings policy, which is like this global policy, which defines for the scope in general how it should handle elevations. And then we have these elevation rules where you can granularly specify exactly what specific applications are allowed to run elevated. So I like to imagine a little bit as a reverse app locker, but for administrator rights. So you can really give granular permissions for elevations. And as Felix has already mentioned before, the supported types are exe, MSI, and PowerShell files. If you have things like batch files that you want to execute, this is also possible. You just need to wrap it in a PowerShell script, and then you can also include it into EPM. So let's talk about the rule definitions. So there are different elevation types. So the elevation type basically defines how the context menu reacts when you try to elevate it as a user. And let me just start from the top. So the first one is user confirmed. And how this works is, so the user clicks the, hey, I want to run this with elevations. And then they will have, you as an administrator, you have two options. You can either require a business justification, or you can also require re-authentication, or you can also require both. So the user has to type in a business justification and re-authenticate. And we think that this is actually one of the best elevation types, because like this, you can ensure even if a device is left unattended and unlocked, nobody can execute any apps with elevation because they don't have the user's credentials. Then the next elevation type would be automatic. I think the name speaks for itself. So the user can elevate themselves and they don't have to type in any business justification or do any re-authentication. Yeah, we would recommend being really carefully with scoping this, because usually you should at least have one requirement to elevate the rights. Then the next elevation type would be support approved. So how this works is the user creates a request. So by clicking on elevate on the context menu, they have to type in a business justification, and this business justification and request is then sent to the Intune portal, and an administrator has to go and look into the Intune portal. We have later a good solution how you can notify the administrators that there is a new request pending. So the administrator has to accept or deny the request, and then it is sent back to the device. The user gets a toast notification telling them, hey, you can now use your application with elevated rights. And we will also show you in a demo how that works exactly. Then the next elevation type is deny. So this is, for instance, for a scenario where, as I was talking about in the beginning, you maybe have developers. And so you set this global settings policy, which is this general global policy. You scope it to the developers and you say, hey, developers can execute everything with the user confirmed elevation type. So they can work autonomously. But maybe there are certain applications I really don't want them to be able to execute. So then I can create an elevation rule scoped to this application and deny elevation. And then last but not least, we also have the elevate as current user. Felix already mentioned it. So EPM uses virtual accounts for all the other elevation types. And for this elevation type, elevate as current user, it elevates the physical user on the device with a token. And this, the good part about this is you can still use the registry Hive or other user-specific resources like mapped network drives, etc. We can also define this all for the child processes of applications. So if you have an application that, for instance, has a child process like an auto update or a compiler or something similar, you can also define how this is handled. And here we also generally say require a rule to elevate is the way to go. So you create a specific rule for those child processes, so you can control exactly what child process can be executed and which can't be executed. And this is just our general recommendation. You can define one policy for an application and you can create multiple settings. So you can also just put it all into one policy and you don't need to do 5 different policies if you have 5 child processes. But then the next one would be, of course, deny all the child processes. Yes, this speaks for itself. You can also allow all child processes. We don't really recommend this only if you really, really trust the application. And then there's another setting, which is set it to not configured. And what this does is, so basically it will go and look in this global elevation settings policy, what is defined there, and will handle the child processes based on those settings. So now let's get into the demos. Felix, do you want to show us the help desk approval process?
Yeah, I will take over the screen share and share something from our test lab. So I hope you can see something.
Yes.
Perfect.
Oh,
yeah, first of all, we have a look on the help desk approval process. And yeah, this is Intune and the Endpoint Privilege Management blade. And here's an elevation settings rule for the support approval process. It's assigned to a test group, where's my user in. And we have a look on the configuration settings. So this is the master switch for EPM. When you enable this, the EPM agent will be automatically installed on the specific clients. And the default elevation response here is requires support approval. And we want to send some elevation data to Intune and want to have all the diagnostic data and endpoint elevations. Yeah, and the rule is active on this client. I have no admin rights when I try to open a command prompt like as an administrator. An URC prompt is coming up. I have no admin rights here, so we don't want to do this. And yeah, now we need a tool which we want to start as an administrator. I prepared the tree size tool. So, and when you want to scan your drive with tree size, you need administrator rights to that you have access to all folders. I have no access. And when I go with the one with elevated access, and yeah, the EPM agent is asking me why I want to start it, and I have to enter a business justification. And this text I type here is also shown to the Intune administrator. So I need to open it for the demo. Send. So the request is sent. Then we can close the window and have a look in EPM. And there's the elevation request, tree size 3 from now with my user. The status is pending. And then we go into it. And we have all information from the executable here, the file, the publisher, my username, which device, the Intune compliance state, yeah, the status of the request, yeah, the last modifier when it was last requested, my justification, when the approval is the expiration date of the approval. So it's always 1 week. The file path, the hash value, version, file description, and so on. And Intune has an option here to create a rule with these file details, so we can just click here and could create an elevation rule and with all these data. But for this case, we want only to approve this one time here. We don't need a rule for more users, but when you want to create a rule that more users can use this tool, you have here the option. But for this case, we want only this here, approve. So go for it. Then the user should get a toast notification. We have to wait some seconds. Here is it. So the request is approved. You can now run tree size 3 as administrator. So we try it, one with administrator rights. Yeah, you will have administrator access to this app. Continue. And here we go. We can scan our local disk. And I try to access a folder with administrator access. So see Windows temp, you can only go to this folder when you have administrator rights. And so it's working. But I want to show something different on my test tenant here. And we talked about the new feature from EPM, which is developed last year, by end last year. So that normal user can open up an app as administrator without being local administrator with his normal user account. So when we try to open the CMD as an administrator, I have no access. But when I try to open with elevated access, I must authenticate with my Windows authentication. And now I'm administrator. I have admin rights on the CMD with my normal user account here. And when I try to open something with administrator, like this part, it works. Yeah. How this works, we can have a look here. And there's an elevation rule, CMD, which is called, user account. It's also assigned to the test group where my user is placed. And here we have the settings that the elevation type is elevate as current user. And when you choose this option, you must always choose the validation with Windows authentication. It is needed. Without this Windows authentication, it will not work. And yeah, so this is also copied from a help desk approval here. And how it works on detail, we will have a look with Stephen now.
Yeah,
so
thank you,
I will
Felix.
End my screen share, and you can take over, Stephen.
Yes. Let me get back into the presentation. So let me get into the right slide. So let us look at the elevation rule with a certificate. I pre-recorded how I created the policy, because for elevation rules, it's a bit special. This also has a heads up if you're testing. Usually when you create a rule and deploy it to a device, it can take a while until it is applied. Sometimes it even needs a reboot. So that's why I already prepared this in advance. So I will just walk you through real quick how we create this policy. So we're here in endpoint security. We switch into the endpoint privilege management blade and create a policy. As you can see, you only have Windows, and then we choose a elevation rules policy. You give it a name, and in this case, we are doing this for Notepad++, so we are going to use the certificate to create this rule. So you give the rule a name, and in the elevation type we talked about before, we're choosing user confirmed, and in this case, I'm using Windows authentication only. And for the child process behavior, I leave it on require rule to elevate. We don't have any child processes. And also in this example, I'm going to define a file path. So this is not required, but I'm doing it to show it to you in this example. And now we are going to upload the certificate file. So this is very simple. I'm going here on Notepad++ onto application, in the properties, in digital signatures. On the details, I can see the certificate. And here I can save it to a file. So I'm saving this to my desktop. I already had it, so I'm just replacing it. And once this file is saved, we can close all the windows. And go ahead and upload it to Intune. Also be sure to switch it to publisher here. And in this case, I want to quickly mention, when you're creating elevation rules, there are two things that are always required. So either you need a certificate, like a digital signature, as we did it now, or you need the file hash. The file hash, you can create it with a PowerShell command. It's also pretty simple. There are also other arguments you can check, like for instance, the minimum version, the file description. You can check on all of these things, but they are not required. It's just an additional option you can build in to make it more safe. And now in this case, I built in the file path. So we have an additional check. So not only the signature is checked, but you can also only execute it from C/Notepad++, as you saw it above. And one interesting thing also here, while we're looking at it, at the very bottom, we have restrict arguments. So here you can also define what command line arguments are allowed and what command line arguments are not. So let us just finish up this policy creation. This is already everything. We have to go ahead and assign it. So I'm assigning it here to a test group. And then saving and creating. That's already everything it needs. Great. So let me also switch into my lab so I can show you how this looks like. Let me enable it. So you should now be able to see my screen. So we remember we enabled Notepad++. So let me first show you my elevation settings policy denies everything. So if I, for instance, try to execute tree size here, run with elevated access, I get this error message. Your organization doesn't allow you to run this app as an administrator. So this is blocked. So if I now go ahead, go into the file location that I declared in the rule, and I execute here this Notepad++ exe, which we got the certificate of. So let us try to elevate this. Okay, open this up as an administrator. And now I have to verify with my credentials. So usually this would be Windows Hello for Business if you have it enabled. Since I'm using a remote session, I had to type in my password. So as you can see, I could now execute Notepad++ as an administrator and works like a charm. Now let me still go into the file path. So this is now where we defined it. So if I take exactly the same folder, this is one by one copied, and I try to execute the same application with the same signature here from downloads, you will see I again get this error message because our our elevation settings policy doesn't allow anything, and our elevation rule only allows Notepad++ with the signature from C Notepad++ from this directory. So let us jump back into the presentation again. So I will hand it over to Felix with the best practices for implementing EPM and troubleshooting.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, best practices. Yeah, we think that you want to start directly after this webinar with the implementing of EPM. So here are some best practices yeah, for the start of EPM. First of all, start with a pilot group. Yeah, deploy EPM to a small group first. Monitor the elevation request attempts, and use diagnostic reports to refine rules before a broader rollout.
Yeah, then be sure to prefer user confirmation, as we've talked about before. If you have an unattended device that isn't locked, it is great to have this additional security step to type in your credentials, as I showed it in the demo. So nobody can elevate from the device, only the user with the credentials.
Yeah, loosen limit scope of rules, define rules as narrowly as possible, using hashes, certificates, and versions to avoid broad or wildcard-based elevations, so that you have no increased risk.
Yeah, then with child processes, be sure to define each child process that you want the user to be able to elevate in a separate rule. Don't just allow all child processes. Usually this is not necessary. Of course, it depends on the application, but yeah, be sure to define it also in rules.
Yeah, use the support approval. Use it for sensitive or unclassified apps to ensure your team and ensure your team so everybody can respond quickly to elevation requests to avoid user delays.
And be sure to continuously review what is happening in your tenant, because if you require, for instance, a business justification, but the users just type in something, then you might as well let it be. So really profit of this great reporting capabilities of EPM. Check if there isn't any misuse and that the EPM rules are used as intended.
Yeah, now we have a look on troubleshooting and additional tools. The EPM agent creates client-side logs. Yeah, you can use the logs to view elevation failures and yeah, for troubleshooting purposes. One tip from our side: use the CM trace tool from SCCM to view the logs. It will help you.
Yeah, and there's also an EPM tools PowerShell module. Once you enable EPM and deploy it onto a device with the settings, elevation settings policy, this is automatically installed. So you just have to import it and you're ready to go. And there you have commands like get policies, so you can see what policies are applied. And you can also, for instance, get the file attributes. And there are also more other commands. So be sure to also check out this PowerShell module. It's integrated and it's a great way to also troubleshoot and see what's actually happening on the device.
Yeah, now we have a look on the EPM integration in our services at glueckkanja. First of all, it's integrated in Manage Intune. Our Manage Intune approach is to deploy policies in your Intune tenant with code, with Terraform and GitHub. So you have a policy versioning, you have a drift detection, and everything you clicked in Intune per hand is stored in the code. And we have Ramjon runbooks for the EPM. So as we have looked in the helpdesk approval, the admin must take a look in the portal to see the approval, and there's no notification to the admins, so the users can wait if the user is suddenly is taking a look in the portal. And so Ramjon runbooks helps here and sends automatically emails to a specific email address, so that the users, that the admins get the notification. So here's an example from our test tenant. You can see in the summary how much pending requests there are, how much unique devices and users. And you can see the detailed requests with the username, file name, device ID, and the justification. And there's also a next step inside with the needed steps you can take to approve the request, and an attachment with the CSV file for detailed information.
Yeah, and we also have a summary notification. So this is great to make your IT manager happy. This is just a summary of everything that happened in terms of EPM on your tenant. You can schedule this to run once a day, once a week, once a month, whatever suits you best. And in this notification that you can send by mail, you can see exactly, okay, how many got approved, how many got denied, what is pending, maybe what got revoked, and you can get a good overview of what is actually happening. And of course, also here, you directly get the CSV file. So if you need to investigate further, you can filter this CSV file and look exactly for the details you need. So with that, this concludes the webinar. I just want to mention again, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A section. I already saw that there are some there. We'll go straight ahead and answer these. And yeah, thank you a lot for your attention. And of course, yeah, now of course the video doesn't work, but a heart from glueckkanja. Okay, so Felix, do we want to go straight ahead into the Q&As? I already saw some questions and I could also answer some of them.
Yeah.
Let me just check it out. Let me look. So maybe a few things that we can answer quick. One question was if Mac OS support is planned, or if we can estimate when this will happen. So currently we don't know of any planned support for Mac OS. Maybe now that this is going to be included into E5, sorry, excuse me. Now, since it's going to be included into E5, we may see more of these requests. So it could be that Microsoft will also include it, but I'm still a bit skeptical since it is a very specific feature to Windows in the context menu. So I don't know how they would exactly technically do this. I don't know if you have any input on that, Felix. You also don't know of any support planned. Yeah, okay. Then one other question I have already answered in the Q&A is also about the E5 licenses. So it's going to be included by July 2026. So you still have to wait a little bit, but by July 2026, you should start seeing the features available if you have E5 licensing. Then another question was, how does EPM cope with any app control for business policies assigned? For example, does EPM bypass an app control policy if it's specifically allowed to run from the EPM policy, but would normally be prevented? So basically, app control wins over EPM. So no matter what you configure in EPM, if app control blocks it down, you won't be able to execute anything. So you have to definitely see that you, base this on when you have your approach that this works out. So we have some new. Let me start from the top. We have the E3 license, and with E5 security, is it possible to just purchase the Endpoint Privilege Management additionally without changing the license to E5 in general? Yes, of course. So you can, if you only have E3, that's not a problem. You can license this feature as an add-on, so as a specific add-on. And so you really only pay for the feature you need. So this is definitely possible. You don't need to switch your licenses to E5 and only to use EPM. Yes, Felix already commented, I can see.
Yeah.
So another question is it possible to allow all exe files in a folder or in a folder or subfolder, I guess? Not really, because the problem is, as I've stated before, you need to either define a file hash or a certificate. So you can't really define a file hash for a folder. So I don't think that this works. We have not tested it. Felix, do you? No, I don't think that.
No. It's for security purposes also not the right way. So create for every file an elevation rule, and then it's okay.
Then another question is, are there Microsoft Graph queries available for pending requests? So I don't know this by heart, but I would say yes. There are definitely graph queries. Unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly which ones, but this shouldn't be an issue. If you're testing the feature, just use, for instance, the graph X-ray add-on in, extension in Edge, and then you can usually see what is queried. And the second question is, how can EPM help to improve workflows for administrators working on the clients, and how does it compare to labs? So, well, I think the big improvement is really that if you have it set up once for all the users, then it just works. And usually only if you have new applications, you need to create new policies, but it really works. And compared to labs, I mean, those depends a little bit if, for instance, your users can get their labs, like a self-labs, a self-service, like in Realm Join, but the big problem with labs is, as an administrator, usually you have to do something. And with EPM, if you, for instance, know exactly, hey, this user needs this application, needs Notepad++ as an administrator, you create a rule and it's done and it's set. You don't need to, you can just set and forget about it because you know this works. And otherwise you would have to each time and every time give the, like, connect to the machine and type in the labs password, and yeah, it just takes forever. Good. Then I hope I could answer these questions. Yeah, Felix, go ahead.
One thing regarding the Microsoft Graph question. Yeah, the runbook is also running with Microsoft Graph and their endpoints. When we have time left at the end, we can take a quick look into the runbook. And yeah.
Good. Then there is, yeah, go ahead, Felix, sorry.
What is the next question in the Q&A?
So there's the last one, or the next one would be, is it possible to allow all certificates from one publisher with one rule? In my opinion, yes. Because
it should work.
In my demo I showed you, I set the file path. So this defined that I could only execute Notepad++, but I set it to publisher. So if I wouldn't have the file path in there, I can use everything from that publisher. Then we have another question. Is EPM officially supported on Windows 10 /11 LTSC editions or only on standard Windows 11? I'm actually not sure about this. We had it in our slides, but we actually removed it since we weren't thinking that Windows 10 is still a topic. But of course, Windows 11 LTSC.
It should work on the newest LTSC versions. On the old unsupported not, but yeah. I can check the article from Microsoft and then I can send a link.
Great. Then we also have, does the management of EPM also work with airbag access so that certain countries' IT management can allow or deny requests for their country-specific devices? So you can create custom roles in Intune, like with the Intune management. So this should be possible. We have not created any custom roles at this moment. I don't know, Felix, if you have any more insights on this question.
No, I have never tested yet.
Okay, so we'd like to get back to you. So I'll just mark this, and then we'll get back to you. Okay, then let me check. There are a lot of questions, so can you elaborate the difference between option A, elevation settings policy, default elevation response, deny all requests, and option B, elevation rules policy, elevation type deny. If we choose option B, how to add multiple unknown applications name in file name box. So let me explain the difference. So if you're setting up an elevation settings policy and you set the default elevation response to deny all requests, that would mean just everything is denied, no matter what. You can't elevate anything. And then if you create an elevation rules policy and set the type to deny, this is only specific for an application. So the elevation settings policy is really this master switch, this general setting where you can say, hey, for my whole tenant, or for instance, for this user group, like for developers, I want to deny all requests. I just don't want them to be able. Or for instance, let's say you have frontline workers and they don't need any elevation. So you would just set this to deny for all of them. And this is done in the elevation settings policy. And the elevation rules policy is only specific to an application. So if I, for instance, allow, let's again take this example of the developers. So you have developers and I set the elevation settings policy to user confirmed. So they can execute everything on their device. They just need to confirm with re-authentication. Then I can go ahead and create an elevation rule policy and set it to deny for a specific application. Like I don't want the developers to be able to execute, I don't know, let's take tree size. I don't want them to be able to execute tree size for whatever reason. Then I can create an elevation rules policy and set it to deny. And like this, this is the difference basically. So elevation rule is specific per application and the elevation settings policy is for all applications in general, like a base setting. And maybe also interesting in this aspect, elevation rules always win over elevation settings. So if you have certain elevation settings like deny everything, and then you allow, for instance, like I did, Notepad++ to be elevated, then the elevation rule wins over the elevation settings. And part of the question was also if we choose option B, how to add multiple unknown application names in the file name box. So you don't need to fill out the file name box. If you have this issue that maybe you don't know the application, you can also, the user can make a request, an elevation request, and then you see it in the Intune portal, and you can see exactly what is the file hash, what is the name, and everything. So you can also work with these requests and create rules from those requests. I hope I could kind of answer your question. Then another question is, can there be a conflict when I have installed, for example, an app like admin by request on the clients? So that's a good question. I personally don't know the tool admin by request, but I can imagine that it could be an issue, but since EPM uses its own context menu, it could be that it works. So unfortunately, we don't have any experience on this. Best is get the license and try it out. I think this tested pretty fast, pretty quickly, and yes. So yeah, we have a lot more to go.
One of the older questions is a version of an already approved app change, is the rule approval automatically updated, or does it have to be reapproved for each version? When you not especially mention the version in the elevation rule, it's possible that it's auto-approved for the newer version and the certificate has not been changed. So then we can go to the top, right?
There was also a question. Yeah, we can go to the top, I think. And there was also a question if AVD multi-session is planned, not that we know of. So maybe not. But as far as we know, there isn't any announcement of Microsoft that this is in planning. So I can see, Felix, you have also already commented on some of the questions. I hope this.
Yeah.
If you just give it a if you give it a thumbs up, we know that that the answer that you are happy with the answer, and then we can move on. So there was another question. How do you manage elevation of Windows Explorer? Some of our developers need to merge repositories in our filer and sometimes swap out DLLs locally in C program files. Since some repos are on the filer, they need to open it with their own user and not the virtual EPM user. Do we need to make a policy for those devs to auto-elevate explorer.exe every time they start? This is a really good use case. Felix, unfortunately, I don't have a straight answer here. This is definitely something we can also get back to. I don't know if you have any insights.
Let me reread the question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you need only access with some users to some folders on your local C drive, my approach would be that you grant user rights to the folder, so that the user can write with his own rights there.
Yeah, we also have a chat message. In my experience, Fabio Klopper is saying, in my experience, it is not possible to start explorer.exe with another user interactively. They will probably need to use command line or a different tool. Yeah, so I think this won't work with EPM the way you intend. Yeah. Either give it, as Felix said, user rights onto the folder, or use an application like command line, so you can elevate the terminal and basically use that. Then, what else? We have more questions here. Just trying to catch up. So if the version of an already approved app changes, is the rule approval automatically updated, or does it have to be reapproved for each version? You have to update it. It is not automatically updated. So we talked about this all.
Was the question what tool can be used for macOS? yeah, we would recommend to use the Intune Labs for it. And another, Fabian Möller mentioned it, admin by request. Yeah, I don't know the tool. I have never tested before, but maybe it's an alternative when EPM is not ready for macOS.
Okay, yeah, I think we basically did all the questions. There was also a question about how we can do monthly patching to end users in SCCM. We have OST, so how can we create it in Intune? But yeah, I mean, you don't need patching, obviously, for EPM. It just works straight out of the box. And yeah, like the suggestion is correct. Windows Auto Patch would be great. But yeah, this is kind of out of the scope of what we're looking at today. So I think, Felix, we answered all the questions, or at least I think we did.
Yeah.
So as Caroline has mentioned, this is all being recorded, and of course you will be able to access it later. And just as a quick reminder, be sure to also register for the other webinars. So Daniel, Felix, and I, we are doing a whole series on the features. So yeah, be sure to check it out. And thanks again for participating. And I don't know, Felix, I give you the last word.
Yeah, thank you for for attending this webinar, and yeah, have a nice day.